Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. This show, I think you're going to find very interesting, extremely interesting, because we're going to delve into some aspects of narcissism that we've not dealt with in the past. And just to start, if you're listening to this later when it goes onto YouTube, please click on my website. I discuss this. You'll see the little link right there at the top. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to interview a licensed psychotherapist. She's from Ireland. Yay, Ireland. And her name is Christine Louise DeConnenville. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, tell us a little bit about yourself, Christine.
Talking to you from Dublin. Well, I'm a psychotherapist and have been for about 25 years. I have worked in psychiatric hospitals. I have worked with the victims of narcissistic abuse for a good many years. And now I'm about to retire, but I'm now teaching therapists in Ireland all about this subject, because generally this is not actually a training that psychotherapists generally get, not just in Ireland, but right across the world. So normally the studies around the narcissist would be with psychiatrists to deal with the narcissist themselves, the perpetrator. But I'm focusing more on the victims. So now I'm going out teaching the therapists about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get into the victimhood here in just a little bit. There's so much on your website. I'm going to link it when this goes up later, and later in the show you can tell people how to get in touch with you. The thing that I found interesting was I listened to one of your presentations, and you said that narcissism is increasing, particularly amongst women and children. Could you explain that?
Okay. Well, first of all, before I begin, let me just remind everybody that we are all narcissistic to some degree. In fact, we actually need to be in order to be healthy, because narcissism is really about self-love. But when we're talking about narcissistic personality disorder, we're talking about an excessive self-love and needing self-service from other people. So that's the difference. Mm-hmm. So, yes, there's a lot of talk about narcissism being mainly about men. That if you look at the statistics, mostly when you are researching, they'll say roughly 70% males and 30% women. But actually, in my practice, I haven't found that to be the case at all. I'd put it nearer 50%. And I think one of the reasons why the statistics are so low on women, it is because, by and large, women, they operate in a slightly different way, which I might talk about later. But mostly, they are in the home, and they are not seen, and they are acting out this behavior on their spouse and their children. And that's not really generally known.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's also a tendency that our society sees such things as, you see it in commercials. The young woman walks by the mirror and she adjusts her hair and all these kinds of things. And so there's a tendency to feel that, the societies are willing to give a little bit more leeway if you're displaying some of the characteristics of narcissism if you're a woman.
Yeah, and I think that, yes, I do think that, Mike, and I think a lot of people think of narcissism as being somebody who is always looking in the mirror, who is always preening themselves, and yes, that is part of it, but that is harmless in itself. They're not really the behaviors that are going to be threatening and harmful that you get with narcissists. So narcissists are not just selfish and vain. They're actually highly dangerous. Mm-hmm. And as for what I think you're tipping on here is in the culture at the moment, we have a culture right across the world, where now um, even things like social media is adding to the whole thing of narcissism. Um, Selfies, photographs, in themselves they're harmless, but it gives you an idea of how people want to stand out, how they want to be special, how they want to be admired. And these are all criteria of narcissism.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we get into later, I promised the viewers here. Later, we're going to get into the difference and similarities between male and female narcissists, as well as maybe their impacts in society. But first, could you give us a breakdown of exactly? You said that all people have an element of narcissism. We all need to have some of that ability to have like self-esteem and so forth. But what makes it diagnosable? I mean, what are the characteristics of a narcissist?
Ah, that's a good question. So basically we're talking about there are 9 criteria for narcissism. So for instance, for your listeners, if you're wondering if you might be in a relationship with a narcissist, as I go through these, I'll go through the 9, I'll name them for you, and then you can sort of see does that apply to you. Now, a person only has to have 5 out of the 9 criteria to actually be diagnosed as having narcissistic personality disorder. So you don't have to have the whole 9. So is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. So let me run through the 9 criteria. Grandiosity. Grandiosity is really important. I actually think that it actually drives all of the other 8 criteria. That's how important I think it is. So grandiosity would be a person who totally exaggerates their achievements, their talents, how special they are, how important they are. And this is very important because even if they're applying for a job, they will exaggerate those achievements. It's not unlike them to say they have a degree when they don't have a degree when they're applying for a job. So they're great, that's how much they believe in their own self. They even believe their own lies. So that's why they carry it off incredibly well. So the second one is, I know that Donald Trump is very current at the moment. Now, there's a good example of somebody who's quite narcissistic. How much he believes in himself, he's the greatest, he's the best. He's going to do better than anybody else has ever done. But we can put this down now even to our friends and our family members. They might act in that same way. Then there's power and control. The narcissist is completely preoccupied with fantasies of success, power, and control. So they want to be the best. They want to be the best looking. They want to have the most money. They want to have the better car. And these are all to them examples of power and control. Third one is being special. Narcissists believe that they are so special that they can actually only be understood by very special people. So they literally do have the God complex. So when they want to go and, let's say, if they're taking something back to the shop, they're not happy to talk to the shop assistant. They want to talk to the manager. If they're going to a doctor, they don't want to talk to his assistant or receptionist. They want to talk to him and feel that they're entitled to do that direct. So that specialness, again, makes them, be peacocks. Number 4 requires excessive attention and admiration. Now that might sound harmless, but it actually isn't. They have to be the center of attention all of the time. And when I'm talking about these 9 criteria, I'm talking about men and women. This applies to both. So they have to be the center of attention all of the time. They have to have admiration because actually they have very fragile egos. So they need to be told how marvelous and how wonderful and how clever and how successful and how charming. They have to be given this repeatedly. And that's why they need something that's called narcissistic supply. And I'll come on to that later, because when we're talking about narcissistic supply, this is where the victim also comes in. Sense of entitlement. Well, that's a sign of their superiority. You know, they're so special. They are entitled to anything. Anything that you have, they're entitled to use. That doesn't mean that you're entitled to use anything that they have. Any friends that you may have, if you're having a friendship with them, they want you to introduce you to all of your friends, so that now they're getting more supply, basically, is what they're doing, and that they're entitled to have friends with your friends. Lack of empathy. They have total disregard for the feelings of others. They can't empathize. To empathize, you've got to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, to know how they might feel when you say something. Quite frankly, they don't care how you feel. When they have something to say, they'll say it. And they don't care whether they hurt your feelings or not. So they're not interested in how something might affect you, because everything is about them. They're exploitative. So they take advantage of every situation and every person for personal gain. And that means anything. So if we had a case here in Ireland not very long ago, where an older woman, she was in her 70s, and she met somebody online, and she thought she was falling in love with this person. He, of course, was special and powerful and all those things, and told her he was a very, very successful businessman, and that he was just selling his business for millions. But he needed some money to do some other deal first. So he found out she had something like 180,000 euros, similar to dollars, and he exploited her. He got all of her. Well, of course, he pretended he was only going to borrow it for a week and give it back to her, and he took absolutely everything. Now, she's a woman in her 70s with no earning power. She'll never accumulate money again. And he didn't even have the decency to leave her with 10,000 to manage. He cleared her out. And that's how exploitative they are. They're envious. They're envious of anything that another person has. They will be envious not only if you're better looking, or if you have more money, or if you have a better house, but if they think that you're more intelligent than them, if you're smarter than them, if you're better liked than them, so that you'll then become an object of envy for them. And that'll be very difficult for the victim. And the last one is arrogant. So they act very haughty and manipulative to others, and they're the best, they're the greatest, they're the grandest, and that's where their arrogance shows. So that's the 9 symptoms, and 5 or more of those is enough to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting.
The more you have, the worse you are.
Okay, so you have a difference between. Now, I hear these terms. I think you're a little close to the mic there. If you could back off just a little bit. I hear a lot of. I hear the term narcissist, and I hear the term malignant narcissist. Do you mean that if they have more of the traits, they're malignant narcissist?
Yes, but that's not what marks them out. There's a difference in the behavior. So if you have the narcissistic personality, will have these 9, any up to these 9 traits. Might only be 5, but they will have up to 9 of these traits. But when we talk about the malignant narcissist, they have all of those same traits, but they also have extra traits. And the extra traits of the malignant narcissist is that they are sadistic. So when they harm you, they take pleasure out of it. They will be much more violent. They'll be antisocial. So there might be a lot of physical violence with them. They're also paranoid. means that they actually, the paranoia is quite important because they actually think that people are out to get them. They always think people are out to get them. And because of that, they're out to get you first. So if they think or imagine, it doesn't have to be even true, if they imagine that you've slighted them, or you're about to slight them in some way, or insult them, or criticize them, they will go on the attack first.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll get you before you get them. So that's the malignant narcissist, but then there's a step up from that, and that's the psychopath. But they will also have all of these 9 criteria that I mentioned. And when we talk about psychopaths, we talk about something called psychopathy. That comes under the heading of psychopathy if you're doing any research. And in psychopathy, not only will they be driven by their narcissism, that's those 9 traits that I spoke about, they will also be they'll also have the characteristics of the malignant narcissist, so they'll be antisocial, they will be paranoid, they will be sadistic. But on top of that, they have something else, and that is they will have brain damage. And that for that reason, they actually have no conscience. Not only do they lack empathy, but they actually have no conscience. Where the malignant narcissist has some bit of conscience.
Okay,
so that's the difference.
So, if you have a choice between being stranded on a desert island with a narcissist, a malignant narcissist, or a psychopath, you're gonna want to have the narcissist rather than the malignant.
You'd be better off having the classical narcissist if that's the case. But the classical narcissist is going to make your life quite difficult. But as long as you keep them happy, as long as you make them the center of your world and keep them happy, they will be happy. And they'll might even try to make you happy in return. But they are so demanding, everything is about them, really. So you have to be willing to more or less lose your identity.
Mm-hmm. So, is there a difference? I've heard this term, overt and covert narcissist. Do you have any research on that?
Yes, there are such things, and if I make it simple, most people would be more aware of the overt. Overt is to be out there, to be seen, out in the open. And they will be the ones that will be looking to rise to the top of the position in the workplace. They will be the one who wants to have be seen to be very, very successful. They'll be seen to be rubbing shoulders with the most powerful people that they can manage to rub shoulders with. So they're very much out there and seen. The covert narcissist is different in that they're actually quite vulnerable. They're quite shy. And they haven't got the ability to get out there and do what the overt narcissist can do. So they're inclined to withdraw into the home. So they might not be successful out there in the world at all. But in the home, they turn their home into their kingdom. In their home, they are king or queen, and they rule, and they'll rule everybody in that household. I come from a history of actually growing up in a household with a brother who was a fledgling psychopath as a child and turned into a full-blown psychopath as an adult. So I learned to live and dance around him and his moods and making sure he was kept okay. And by doing that, by keeping him okay, basically it kept me relatively safe. So it was clever behavior for me as a child. I mean, how does a child know how to survive is quite amazing, really. I would have taken the stance of being a pleaser and very passive. So if I saw his mood change slightly, I would be giving him my toys, or I would be saying, oh yeah, let's play your game, and I would just hand everything over to him. But in doing that, I kept him happy. And in keeping him happy, I kept myself safe some of the time, but not all of the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned a brother, and the thing is, that just makes me think, is this something you've seen in other members of your family? Is there a genetic component that you have seen when it comes to this dark triad, the psychopathy and, narcissism, and, it escapes my mind the other part of that.
Malignant narcissist.
Yes.
That's a really good question, Mike. Actually, both my parents were incredibly loving people, and definitely there was no violence or anything like that at home. Not that I ever witnessed, anyway. And unfortunately, my brother had an accident when he was 2 years old, a very serious accident. He fell out of an upstairs window onto his head, onto concrete. Now, at the time, everybody thought he was okay. To add to that, he also went to a school in Holy Ireland. This is in the 1940s, and he was unfortunate to go to a school that had Christian brothers at that time, and it was very severe. And they did try to break his spirit, but he was the kind of person anyway who would resist that, and they punished him and beat him more. Now, he might have been difficult in the classroom. He may already have had difficulties, because I am absolutely certain that he was damaged in that fall, that he actually had frontal lobe damage, where that would have knocked out his level of control. He wouldn't have control over himself when he'd get into a rage. But most of the time, my brother was soft and gentle and quite charismatic. But then something would happen, and you never knew when that something would happen or what would trigger that. And then he'd go into a rage. And then, literally, he actually put 3 of us siblings in intensive care with the rages.
Oh.
So it'd be highly dangerous then.
Was he successful in life?
No, he became the covert narcissist who withdrew from life. He had a large family. Actually, his family are beautiful. He has 9 children, and they are all beautiful, beautiful people, because they learned to be polite. They learned to, not push buttons. They learned to take care of his moods the way I did as a child. And he had got worse by the time his children came along. But he ruled that house as he was king. And everybody had to serve him and his needs. And the way he controlled things was maybe partly because he'd had such a bad time at school himself. I suspect that is part of it. But he would not allow his children to go to school. Now, he did home teach them, and so, they actually have done very well. However, because they didn't go out to school, he didn't allow them to have friends at all. He reckoned that there were 9 of them. They had enough friends amongst themselves. Everybody had somebody near to them to be their best friend, so they didn't need any other friends at all. Now, the problem with that is, when you're so isolated, and you're so controlled, and you're so dependent on, literally getting permission to leave the house, that there's no place to check your reality. You don't know as a child if this is normal, that everybody is this is normal. It was normal for their household. But if they didn't have friends, they had no, at least a child who'll go into another home with their friends will get a chance to actually get a reality check. Oh, this is so different from my home. So they didn't get to experience that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now that brings up. Before we get in, I want to get into some of the effects of the parenting. But first, I want, as I promised people, what is actually? Let's say you have two people. One of them's a man, one's a woman, and they both rate the same on a narcissist scale. What will be the differences in how they interact romantically, in the workplace, as well as at home?
Just let me clarify. Are you saying that you have a couple who are both narcissists?
No, they're not married.
Oh, no.
They're not married. It's just...
You're talking about the male and the female. How different are they?
Yeah, hypothetical individuals.
Okay. Well, a lot of their behaviors will be the same, because all of those criteria I read out would fit both male and female. But at the same time, there are also differences, and that will become apparent in a minute. So, I'm thinking of, let's, for instance, would we look at the home first?
Sure, why not?
Okay, so let's take the father in the home. Or, as a husband, he's going to rule. Everybody's going to jump to his tune. He'll control and direct everything. He will not allow any privacy, so his children or his wife won't have privacy because he wants to control absolutely everything. People, generally they are very happy to have people afraid of them because they can then control by fear. Mostly fathers will see their children as a bit of a nuisance. Mostly they will. At the same time, they will want their children to serve them and to make sure that they do everything that they can to support the father. And they'll have to actually, that'll cost the children because he has to be served first before them. So, for instance, if he wants his son to go into his business and the child doesn't want that, the child might want to, I don't know, be anything, sportsman or wants to be a musician or whatever, that's probably not going to be allowed. He will insist, and he will use guilt, and he will use pressure, he will use violence, and anything he needs to control that child to go into his business. So they also see their children are objects. Now both male and females will see their children as objects, but because he sees his child as an object, unfortunately, he'll see that child as an extension of himself, and very often there will be sexual abuse, certainly physical abuse, emotional abuse, and psychological abuse. He won't see that child, he won't see them as individuals. They're there to serve in whatever way. So, how's that picture looking?
It sounds like a feudal kingdom versus a household. How about the mother then?
The mother is a different animal again. Basically, mothers break down into two areas. Now, there are different types. I think there's about 6 different types that you can research. But basically, they all will break down into 2 types. So there's either the engulfing mother or the ignoring mother. And the 2 categories sometimes combine a bit of both, occasionally. So I'll give you some idea of the behaviors of the engulfing mother. This mother does not allow healthy boundaries to exist between herself and her children. The child is an extension of her. And they have to be an extension. Now that can become a terrible problem when the child is going through the normal stages of development, when a child individualizes. Every child should start to pull away from their mother at some point. And of course, when that starts to happen with the narcissistic mother, she goes into terror, because she does not want her child becoming individual and independent. She wants to hold on to them as long as she can. She controls everything about her children: what they think, what they feel, how they act, what they say. And in order to hold her position, she actually uses a range of tactics that the fathers don't use, which is very interesting. So, for example, they will parentify their child. That means that they'll make their child very, very responsible. And they have to be responsible to make sure that she gets her needs met, that she's taken care of. She'll often take to her bed. So the bigger children will have to maybe cook the meals and clean the house and become very responsible. She'll also do something called sorry, I can't say it now. She'll keep them infants. She'll go out of her way to actually slow down their development. So she'll hold them back. She'll make them fearful of the world. She wants to keep them children. One woman, I was working with her child that came to me. The school referred the child because the child wasn't actually settling in at all. And when I met the child, the mum came with her. And now you could say that this is just a mum being loving, and it maybe in some cases it would have been, but when I put other bits together, it wasn't. But she held the child's hand. She came into the therapy room and she held the child's hand, and I'd asked the child a question like, "And what's school like for you?" And she'd look to the mum, and the mum would answer for her. And that happened repeatedly. The child was afraid to leave the mum's side. The moment she left her mother's side, she got separation anxiety, and this is what the school couldn't handle, because the moment the mother left, the child fell apart. And the child was about 8 or 9. This was not a toddler who had just started school. So they keep their children back. I don't know if you ever saw that comedy series called Sorry. It was with Ronnie Corbett, the comedian.
Mm-mm.
But in that series, it doesn't matter if you didn't see it. In that series, Ronnie Corbett has to do everything his mother says, and she checks, have you got your coat on, and have you got your gloves? And this man is 48 years old, and he's not allowed to have a girlfriend. He's not allowed to stay out late. And it's funny when you watch it as a comedy series, but actually that's a perfect example is an exaggerated version of a narcissistic mother and how she keeps her children back. She will triangulate her children. The father doesn't do this. She'll set the children against each other. So if she's having, it's especially noticeable when they're adult children. So if she's having a difficulty with one of her children, and she will go to the other children and she'll act the victim, and she'll say, I'm having terrible trouble with Mary. She's being so rude and so cheeky and bullying me. And then what the other siblings will do is they'll go back to that sibling and say, what are you doing? Leave mom alone, or you'll have to deal with us. And then they'll isolate her. So she gets isolated even further. Now, this is tactics that the mothers use, and it's very, very distressing to the children. She'll also give the children roles. The father doesn't, well, he might do it to a degree, but she particularly does it. So she'll, for instance, she's likely to have a golden child. But wherever there's a golden child, there's likely to be a scapegoat child. So the golden child can't do anything wrong. They basically become her mirror image. And of course the child is always praised and always told how gorgeous they are and how lovely and how clever. And of course the child thrives in that. But the child also has to mirror her greatness back to the mother. So the golden child might be the one who'll do well at school. And of course then the mom gets the accolades of that for having such a clever child. The scapegoat child is the opposite. There the child can never do anything right. And the sins of everything is projected onto this child, including the parts of the mother that she doesn't like of herself will be projected onto that child. And they get a very bad time of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the lost child. The lost child is the child who actually manages to disappear. Nobody seems to see it. It seems to spend more time with it in their friends' homes. The lost child takes on the role of not wanting to be a burden. They don't want to add any more than already is going on in the home, where already you have the golden child probably and the scapegoat child, and they are not going to add to that. So they actually end up not being seen, not even being missed if they're at the table, and everybody's eating. Where's Johnny? Oh, Johnny, he's with his friend. He'll eat there. So that child is lost. But none of these roles are good, and none of them are healthy. And where you might think that the golden child fares best, actually that's not what I've discovered in the therapy room. In the therapy room, the one that I find that actually fares best is the scapegoat child. Because what happens to the scapegoat child is they learn quite young to be independent. They separate out. They become a bit rebellious, but that actually helps to keep them intact.
I want to get into the differences in the romantic field in just a second, but hearing the way that the mother in this case, if she's a narcissist, is treating the children, I have read that on something about psychopathic mothers, and I don't know if you've seen it, but it seemed to indicate that they too see the children as a projection of themselves, so they almost become like the mother who might have 5 kids that all wind up being straight A students who are totally successful, because if they aren't successful, that reflects upon her.
Yeah, but they may not all be doing well. And what will happen is the ones that are doing well will be given everything to do even better. So they will be, like, for instance, in my brother's case, now I know it's not the mother, we're talking about the father, but in my brother's case, his children, in spite of the fact that they didn't go to school and they didn't mix, one way they did get out of the house at one point when they were a little bit older was they wanted to take up sport. And they were allowed to take up gymnastics, and they were allowed to take up swimming and diving, the elder ones. But all of them went on to become very, very highly successful in those areas. One was competing at Olympic status in gymnastics. One became a coach who was coaching high-flying gymnasts. And so they became incredibly good. Some of them became musicians, and 3 of them are earning their living by music. And these are children that never had a music lesson or went to school in the way that most of us have. So yes, when they did something, they were expected, and this is what you're getting at, and this is where you're absolutely right. Whatever they did, they had to excel in it. If they didn't excel, actually to the point of, I remember one day visiting, and one of the boys who had just won, he had competed in a major gymnastic, whatever it is, and he got a silver medal. And actually, he was told to tell him, I asked, well, how did you do? And he was told, go on, tell her how you did, by my brother. And he said, and with his head down in shame, he said to me, I came second. And of course, I didn't realize the implications of that then. I said, oh my God, you got a silver medal. Oh my God, you're amazing. But nobody else in the room was acting that way with me. So basically, he was told that he was the first loser. Silver is first loser. So that'll tell you how they are expected to perform. Yes, you're right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And finally, because of time here, I want to deal with the whole thing about romance. What's the difference if suddenly you've met the man or woman of your dreams or whatever? What is going to be the difference between if you if you're a guy, you meet a gal and she's a narcissist, or if you're a woman, you meet a guy and they're a narcissist?
Okay, well, let me give you the similarities, because there will be similarities. First of all, the relationship is going to move with the speed of lightning. It's like you'll be in a whirlwind of absolute and utter romance like you've never known before. It's going to be incredible. You'll love it. You'll be swept up in it. And of course, you'll be love-bombed. You can't do anything wrong. But what in fact has happened is, in the romance, in fact with all narcissists, you will go through three stages. And the first, this is often termed as gaslighting. Have you come across that term?
Yeah, when you try to get the other person to think they're always the problem.
It's much bigger than that. Gaslighting goes through three stages, and the first stage is idealization. So in the first rush of the relationship with either the male or the female, you are going to be totally and utterly seduced. You are going to be treated like you've never been treated before, and it's going to be fantastic. They will listen to you. The only time that they'll ever listen to you will be in the beginning of the relationship, and they will listen intently. And what they are actually doing is they are listening because they want to get to know your beliefs and your values, because later they'll turn those against you. But in the beginning, they're wanting to learn what there is about you. And you're going to feel that they are really interested in you, and that's what you feel. But actually, no. And then they will actually, so if you say, oh, I love philosophy, they say, oh my God, I love some philosophy. I always read, and they'll know a little about everything. They won't know very much about anything, but they'll know a little of everything. So you think, in a very, very short space of time, you think you've actually met your soulmate. It's that quick. And it's all the love bombing that they do and the gaslighting that they do. So you actually think this is somebody really, really special, that, your soulmate, literally. It doesn't take very, very long. The idealization phase doesn't last long before it turns into the next phase. Once they know that they have you hooked, once you start saying things like I love you and showing your love, they know now you're hooked. And once you enter that, you're now going into the second phase, and that is actually, you're now entering into a stage where you're going to be turned on. Your world is going to be turned upside down. Where you couldn't do anything wrong, now you suddenly can't do anything right. You will be bullied. You'll start to lose your own identity. You become almost an echo of them, repeating things that they say and do. You thought that you had fallen in somebody who looked exactly like you, but actually what they had done was they had mirrored you back to you. So you thought that they were like you. They're not a bit like you at all. And so now you've entered the devaluing stage. And that is an awful shock for anybody. It confuses the victim, that they can't trust their own self. They begin to not trust their own memory, because the gaslighting will tell you, like, he might say to you, I'll give you a ring at 1 o'clock. Then he doesn't ring you, and then when he comes in, you say, why didn't you ring me at 1 o'clock? He'll say, I never said that. You must be dreaming. You must be making it up. You're mad. And you hear enough of that you start to actually not trust your own instinct, your own memory. You start not being able to make very good decisions. So the person is losing their identity. And then finally, the third stage is when there's nothing more to be got from you. You've been sucked dry, basically. The narcissist will be looking for another form of narcissistic supply to replace you. And then you're discarded. Now, they may not necessarily leave the house. They may not leave you. They might still stay there and still get the supply from you by being cared for, being taken, their clothes being cleaned and ironed, food being delivered to them on the table. But they will leave you and go outside to others, maybe romantically, maybe not, but they'll still go outside for entertainment and to be a grand chap while you're basically left at home.
So they'll get their validation from other sources.
Absolutely, and many different sources. They need an awful lot of supply. They need an awful lot.
Yeah, because my understanding is that, for instance, politicians that are narcissistic, it seems like in the Western world we either have a choice between a narcissist or a psychopath when they're running for office. And the thing about the narcissist is, they're always referring to what wonderful things they've done and themselves, but my understanding is they really need that validation from the audience. They really need that constant stimulation.
They absolutely need it. It's oxygen to them. If they don't have it, their ego begins to crack. They are very, very vulnerable, and they can actually become quite almost psychotic when they don't have. If they lose their narcissistic supply and they're not expecting it, like let's say the partner literally leaves them, and they weren't expecting that. They didn't think that was going to happen. They can often almost become psychotic. They almost, they're threatening suicide and all sorts of things until they get their balance back.
Mm-hmm.
And they will get their balance back quite quickly because they will immediately start looking for other supply.
Yeah, so
and that could be the children. If there's nobody else around, it'll be the children will be making up that slack.
Mm-hmm. So, like in work, just give an example. You might have a professor who, is like one of those favorite professors on campus, and then they get a role change. Maybe they get advanced where they have more power in research, but they become depressed because they're no longer getting students every day telling them how fantastic their insights are.
Absolutely. And then, of course, they might turn where while they're happy, they're quite likable. When they're happy, they make everybody happy. But they don't stay happy for long, that's the problem. But if he's had that fall from grace, then he'll turn in on his family and he'll give them hell. But outside he'll still appear the grand chap. Because outside he doesn't want to be discovered that there is this side to his personality. And they hide that.
Yeah, so in case of a female, maybe when she's younger she's getting all this prey. Let's say she's in, I would tend to think that entertainers are probably highly narcissistic. It kind of gets into that archetype of the young starlet who everyone adores, but then she gets older and then becomes a recluse just watching her old movies over and over again.
Yes. And they are, generally speaking, they do, both male and female, they turn themselves out very well. They can look very good when they want to. And of course that makes them look, the research says that they're actually not any better looking than the normal population. But they can believe in themselves so much that they can actually look even more attractive. When you truly believe in yourself and your self-esteem around your own looks is high, you'll carry it off better. But when aging really worries the women terribly. I know it worries a lot of women, but I'm talking about where a narcissistic mother will be very, very jealous of her daughters because their daughter represents their youth. They see themselves in their daughter. Even maybe looks-wise, they might see themselves in their daughter. But their daughter is youthful, and she'll become very, very jealous of her child, and will do what she can to destroy that person's confidence and her self-esteem. She'll pull it down. She'll criticize her. She'll dictate to her what to wear, but she'll actually want her to dress down, and she'll want her, don't be wearing all that makeup, because she doesn't want her to look attractive.
So it's like not the Disney Snow White, because I've heard that the original Snow White, that the evil queen or whatever, is actually her mother.
Okay.
So it's that kind of, negativity. At least that's what I've heard. Not in the movies that Disney did, but if you go back to the original stories, then it is kind of a mother versus daughter situation.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much like that. And that can be devastating to the daughters, because very often the daughters can be equally as beautiful, but they don't know that. They don't feel it. They don't think it. They're told they're not as beautiful. I mean, I had a lady that I worked with, and she had a 14-year-old daughter. And the 14-year-old daughter seemed to be very, very innocent. Anyway, she made her she was giving out to me saying, she doesn't make the most of herself. Anyway, she took her to the hairdressers, got her hair dyed and everything else, and bought her an outfit. So they went home, and she put on the outfit, and the mother told her, oh yeah, you look gorgeous, you look lovely, but let me try that outfit on. And then she took the outfit, put it on herself, and she said, oh no, this is much nicer on me, this suits me much better than you, your legs are too fat.
Oh wow, that's...
So you see the way that she built her up. She wanted her to look her best, and that was to reflect on her as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she saw her looking so good, actually she was threatened. So she actually then insulted her and criticized her.
Yeah, a really kind of a weird sort of... we get into the whole Freudian thing about the Electra and Oedipus complex. It seems like it's a distortion, but still has a connection to it. In the remaining couple minutes, could you tell us, you've got this excellent website, you've got lots of books there. Tell the audience what they, how they can access this material.
Okay, you can go on to my website, which is narcissisticbehavior.net. If you want to email me, you can email me at Christine@narcissisticbehavior.net. My site there's a lot of free articles on there that you can read. I also have a book which is called The Three Faces of Evil, which I actually explain the differences between the dark triad that you mentioned, Mike, the different levels of narcissism. That's what that book is about. And there's also, I've actually recorded workshops. People who couldn't get to my workshops because they lived in other countries, I actually recorded 3 of my workshops, and 2 of them are up on site now, and there's a 3rd one going up, funnily enough, on narcissistic mothers, and that'll go up in a few weeks' time. So, but there are plenty of free articles there as well.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. I love this whole thing with now that we're all connected by the internet and stuff, that we can, you're in Ireland and, but yet
Yes.
people all over the world can still have a connection and learn from you. Okay, well, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank my audience out there for, tuning in. I hope you learned something. And check out Christina's website and find out more information. There's a lot more there than we could possibly go over in this hour. Anyway, we're running out of time here. So, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you'll tune in next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. Take care now.
JJ Inc. from Against the Wall, and you're listening to UCY.com.